Hello, welcome. I am very excited to be here with you today and to explore a topic that's always important to explore, and I feel like especially more so as we are about to head into the holiday season. So we're going to explore the art of setting boundaries. And so right off the bat, I invite you to kind of tune into what comes up for you when I say boundaries and setting boundaries and having boundaries and speaking your boundaries. I hope that by the end of our time today that you will come to see this as one of the most sacred acts of self-care that is actually not just in service to you, but really in service to, we could say the world. When we're well boundaried and caring for ourselves, we are able to show up in a much more powerful way. So we will today dive into why setting boundaries can feel so challenging. We will explore practices inspired by nature and, of course, reflect on what the Death Doula archetype, who represents this late autumn time on InnerSpark's Wheel of the Year, what they can teach us about release and transformation as it relates to setting boundaries. So this holiday season is a time when many can feel very stretched too thin and pressured to do all the overs, as I call them: overcommit, overdo, overeat, overthink, overspend. So let's talk about how to honor ourselves, protect our energy, and create sacred space for what really aligns with our values. All right. So before we go any further, I am Devon, and I'm an integrative health expert, an Ayurvedic health advisor, and a holistic life coach. And my mission and passion in life is to teach folks how to live nature's wisdom and rhythms so that they may deepen into their journeys of healing and self-discovery and create unshakable resilience and health and joy and commitment or contentment. Joy and contentment, so that there can be commitment to who they really are, what they are really up to in life. So let's get into boundaries. Boundaries can often be misunderstood and misinterpreted. So I've worked with a lot of people over the years who have had all sorts of different beliefs around boundaries and experiences with having them and setting them. Many of us have a very hard time setting them. So let's just, start right there. Many of us don't know what appropriate boundaries are, and either have things that are more akin to walls, where it's just like completely just an all or nothing kind of rigid keeping things out, or they're simply just without boundaries and just kind of floating around and hoping for the best. And neither case goes very well. So just kind of reflect on where you are and maybe where you have been, where you might like to be with boundaries. So boundaries are not barriers or walls. They're not these things that are negative or that we shouldn't have. I've had a lot of people say that they feel like they're not allowed to have them, that it will make them come across as like rude or not being there for other people. And it's like, oh my goodness, no, this is not that. So these are not barriers or walls. They are life-giving structures that allow us to conserve our energy, to commit to what is actually important to us, and to nourish ourselves very deeply, and in many cases release what doesn't serve us. So when we are saying no or yes to something, we're saying no or yes to something else by default. So when I say no to staying up really late and watching another episode of something, or continuing to read my book, or whatever it is that people are doing when they're staying up too late, when we say no to that, we're saying yes to our tomorrow self, and yes to more energy, yes to better rest, yes to then all the things that come with that: better clarity, better emotional stability, better relating with other people, etc., etc. So when there's a no, there's a yes, and when there's a yes, there's a no. And when we can honor boundaries, this helps us in that release process of what no longer serves us. Thinking about boundaries as acts of self-love and self-respect is really, really helpful. So it's not about what I am or am not doing with or for others. It's not about shutting people or experiences out, but about creating space for what actually matters to us. So for a lot of us that have had difficulty with setting boundaries and have maybe been not well boundaried, a lot more porous and just kind of floating around, we really lose touch with what actually matters to us in life, because we are saying yes when we actually want to say no. And so then by default, not honoring what we are actually up to in life, what we want to be up to in life, what is really important to us. And that breeds all kinds of things: resentments and angers, and ultimately disease of the body and the mind and the spirit. Boundaries are us staying true to ourselves while also engaging in the world. So it's this both. It's this showing up as your most authentic, aligned, truest self, which is actually what the world needs more of. Doesn't need more burnt out, misaligned, disconnected people that are doing things that they don't actually agree with or align with, saying the yes when they want to say no and the no when they want to say yes. Boundaries are adaptable and flexible, and we may shift them around as we need. They're never fixed or rigid. We can have a boundary, then we grow and evolve, and maybe that boundary shifts a little bit. We may have different boundaries in different roles that we have in our lives. So, for example, boundaries at work might be different than your boundaries at home. Boundaries with some people might be different than boundaries with other people. So these are ways that you can, again, engage with the world while also honoring yourself, which is actually needs. I have a lot of experience in my own background, my own personal mythology, and with the clients that have worked with me with this kind of different people pleasing or codependent, if you will, behaviors. And so that's where a lot of this boundary work can be really helpful. And once we can start to realize that if I actually think that what I want is to be a good person in the world and to show up authentically and joyfully and with kindness and help people and serve, that's going to be so much more fruitful and deep and rich and meaningful if you're coming from a well-boundaried place. So they have to go together. They go together. One last thing, just for today, because we could go on and on about this, but another piece I wanted to bring in here was that's really overlooked a lot, is that boundaries, we have both internal and external boundaries. So I have boundaries within myself for my own conduct, and then I've got boundaries with others in the outside world. So just kind of like play with that, and they influence each other. So the internal boundaries is really me knowing my values, knowing myself, knowing what I need and what I don't need, what's important to me, the direction I am going and walking in life. And that helps me stay true to myself and my path. And then I can voice those and express those when I set boundaries with others or with situations, or, again, with those different roles that we play. So my boundaries with work and the hours that I will work honor me, and thereby honor my clients. You don't want a session with Devon at a certain time of day because my brain is mush at that point. So I honor the boundaries of my own rhythms, and what I can and can't, what I will and won't do, rather, for how I will best show up and be of service. So that's just one example. My eyelashes are sticking together. Like, you needed to know that. Nature's wisdom offers countless examples of boundaries. And you all know by now that I really appreciate the different metaphors and teachings that nature offers us. And so when it comes to boundaries, right, we can analyze and intellectualize and plan how to do them and this, that, and the other. But when we can really tune in to what we witness around us about them, it makes it make so much more intuitive sense. So there's countless examples, and I wanted to offer rivers as one of them. So the banks provide the structure for the river to flow and for the water to then nourish the surrounding environment without spreading too thin or losing its purpose or, spilling out too much or anything of the sort. It's this beautiful, like, this is the defined area, this is the container, this is the path, this is where the water can flow, and it's going to do its thing. Another one is forests. So the way that the trees all grow together, they have their space and their place. Each element and the plants, the animals, all of it has its space and role. So boundaries within those different ecosystems prevent over depletion and ensure that everything can thrive harmoniously. And they all kind of take care of each other as they communicate and live around each other. And how beautiful would that be if we could all do that a little bit more with the people in our lives, yeah? So when we can look at these examples, or even just looking at the ways that animals engage with each other, watching them play, and when one is done, it's like, maybe there's a little nip and then the other one knows, and so then it's like, all right, I respect you and we're done with this activity for now. So really spend some time maybe in the coming days just looking around, watching kids, even young kids, watching animals, watching the plants, and noticing what you notice about boundaries. Because we will see that they're not restrictive and that they're essential. They're essential for balance, vitality, and flourishing the big whole picture. So they're not selfish. They're not something that you're not allowed to have. They're actually in deep service to the big picture. Before I go into 3 simple practices for setting boundaries, I really wanted to bring in this seasonal component, this late autumn archetype from InnerSpark's Wheel of the Year, this Death Doula archetype that is here with this late autumn before we go into solstice next month. So we're in this time for about another month. And this figure holds the space for endings and transformation and releasing so that we can make room for growth and replenishment. So just kind of tune in as we're in this time of release. And again, we're looking to nature and the leaves are falling. How does that tie into your boundaries? So what are you carrying that is ready to go? And what will that allow more space for? And how do boundaries play into that? So we can think again of boundaries as a form of release. And by setting them, we're letting go of what drains us. So we're saying no when we want to say no, and yes when we want to say yes, and realizing the other side of that. When I say no to something, I'm saying yes to something else. And when I say yes to something, I might be saying no to something else, and that might be just fine. So when I say yes, back to the example of sleep, when I say yes to going to bed at an early, delicious time for me and my body, I am saying no to feeling like caca the next day and being foggy and groggy and then leading to poor decision making, or, the whole things, the law of cause and effect that we speak so much about in the InnerSpark Method Everyday Rhythms program. It's a very important, wonderful way of going through life. It helps tremendously in making things more neutral and simple. So boundaries are our container for life to more easily, effortlessly, and efficiently flow through us. We're holding that container. Again, in my work, we would call this the triangle principle. So we are holding space for life to flow or spiral through. We talk about the spiral and the triangle. So really honoring those boundaries and allowing life to flow and to cycle. And so 3 little quick tips I wanted to offer is, in order to set boundaries, we kind of need a couple of ingredients. And the first and foremost, that is the most important, that I really work with my clients a lot on, and we check in on them every so often, is being very clear on your values. So what are your core values? What is most important to you in life? What do you need more of to feel nourished and whole? And so these answers are the roadmap to your boundaries, because they help you to orient your life in a way that is honoring these values, so that you're not spilling energy and effort needlessly around you, just, and then wondering what's going on when you don't feel well. You are staying very, very true to yourself by aligning with those values and having your boundaries reflect that. And then also being really aware of your energetic boundaries. So they're physical and they're also energetic. And if the concept of energy is different or new for you, or you're like, I don't know about this, play. I really invite you to play. Something that is really beautiful that I offer and that I work with all the time, I've done it several times today already, is to visualize a protective bubble around yourself, if you will. So you can close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, you can see it, or you can simply just sense it, this kind of protective, soft, glowing shield around you. However it looks, it's a very personal practice. There's tons of different techniques, and there's only one, or a few, that are going to be right and resonant for you. And so find something that really speaks to you and that you feel, and stick with that. So feeling yourself safe and clear and connected to yourself, and protecting your energy so that you're not picking things up from other people, and you are squarely in your own space, or bubbly, spherically in your own space. Maybe your bubble is square. It can be whatever you want it to be. And then from there, there's different things to play with, obviously. Also, you can ground, you can clear, but just to kind of have that sense of an energetic boundary, especially when you're in situations with different people, or you have had a stressful day, just getting that bubble, that shield, and getting back into yourself. And then lastly, having that clear confidence to communicate with other people. And in my experience with the people that I've worked with, this one typically tends to be the toughest. It can feel really hard to express those boundaries to other people. And it takes practice, and it gets a lot easier. So if you're someone that's come from a background where you have felt like you're not allowed to have boundaries, you're not allowed to express your needs, maybe you've been told you're difficult or too much, these are all other people's nonsense. That, again, this is a great place for those energetic boundaries. Clearing that space and coming into yourself and realizing that you are actually worthy of communicating those boundaries and those needs, and worthy of having them and having that met. And if you're in a situation where that's not happening, get out of that situation, because you can do that too. So this clear communication is an act of self-love and self-respect, and also an act of love and respect to the recipient as well. So using kind and clear language, focusing on your needs rather than blaming others, using I statements. And then the most important thing is trusting that you're worthy of the space and energy that you're protecting. And no is always a complete sentence. So if you're invited to something, you can say something, sure, and you don't want to go, of course. You can say something like, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm going to spend the evening resting. Thank you for understanding. Sometimes you don't even need to go into that much detail. Really, just like I said, no is a complete sentence, or thank you for thinking of me. I'm going to decline. So things like that, just as a little example. There's rarely a need for over-explaining or justifying yourself. So in closing today on this wonderful topic, really coming to frame boundaries in a new way, looking to nature as inspiration, and seeing that just as nature's boundaries preserve ecosystems, preserve the whole order of things, our personal boundaries offer us emotional balance. It's part of sustainable self-care, and it's living in alignment with our true selves and our true needs, so that we're orienting our life around what is really important to us, because ultimately this is our one precious life, and we get to live it from within and show up and blossom like the beautiful flower that we are in our own unique way. And boundaries are a very important part of that sense of fulfillment. Conserving our energy and honoring our needs and giving then from a place of overflow rather than depletion or resentment. And all of this, like I said, is really explored much more further in the InnerSpark method, Everyday Rhythms. So if you are ready to deepen into your journey of healing and self-discovery and recreate your foundation for daily living to foster deep resilience and health and joy, then I invite you to join the InnerSpark method, Everyday Rhythms, and you can explore all of this and come to live in harmony with nature's cycles and your own true self, and cultivate this framework of sustainable self-care and sustainable just journeying and growing through life by having this framework. I love this work so much. I'm completely in love with this offering. So come check it out at theinnersparkmethod.com/everydayrhythms. And thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to continue this conversation with you inside of the naturally resilient and thriving community. So tell me about your experiences with boundaries. Tell me if you're concerned about the holidays that are coming up and setting boundaries with people around that. Let's talk about this, because I guarantee you you're not alone, and we can uplift and support each other. So let's commit to honoring our energy and really aligning with what matters most to us, so that we are actually of service in the world, because being unboundaried is not in service to the world. Even if we might think like, oh, but I'm so easygoing and I'm doing all the things and I'm saying yes, that's not actually in service. So boundaries galore. Let's do it. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you next time.